If I were to try and describe Berserk to a stranger in as few words as possible, I would say this. Imagine every kind of human suffering you can. All those and more you will find here. Over the course of the story, every character, from the smallest to the largest, goes through hell. Their own bespoke, beautifully constructed hell that is true to their character and their place in the larger world. Feelings of inadequacy and regret, loss of innocence, dark temptations and obsessions, frustration at an unfair universe, the numbing pain of duty and servitude, the loss of everything that keeps you safe from the world around you, the restless desire to find approval and success, the damage caused by betrayal. This brief description of the story and the characters may lead you to believe that this is a world and story without hope for the future. But Kentaro Miura was not a nihilistic man. His work doesn't just show the hell our characters go through, it also shows the purgatory and the struggle that allows them to free themselves from it. Sadly, due to his passing earlier this year, some of our favourite characters may never see the end of their purgatory, just as we may not see the end of our own struggles for redemption and inner peace. Except for one. The world of Berserk is full of demons and monsters, but what about when the demon lives inside you? What about the demons that have been there so long, you can no longer tell the difference between you and them? Today, I want to talk about one character who, after many trials and emotional upheavals, did manage to escape her inner beast of darkness and rise above it, unrecognisable from who she was before. The commander of the Holy Iron Chain Knights, last daughter of the Vandermond family, Farnese. But hold on, you say, gentle viewer. Guts has his beast of darkness, yes, we see it all the time, but Farnese's is never shown to us, right? That's because it was there the whole time, right in front of us in plain sight. And its name? Borderline personality disorder. Borderline personality disorder is characterized by the DSM-5 as follows: chronic feelings of emptiness, emotional instability in reaction to normal events, intense fear of abandonment or loss, a persistently unstable identity, impulsive and risky behavior, intense emotion that is difficult to control, interpersonal relationships that are characterized by splitting, or an extreme swing between idealization and complete devaluation, recurrent suicidal or self-harming behavior, and stress-related paranoia or even dissociation. If you have over 5 of these symptoms, you might find yourself diagnosed with BPD if you end up seeking help for mental illness. If the world of Berserk contained anything like a psychiatrist, Farnese's notes would probably look like this: emptiness, check; emotional instability, check; fear of abandonment, check; unstable identity, check; impulsive, check; intense emotion that's difficult to control, check; self-harm, check; interpersonal relationships characterized by splitting, oh boy, all the checks; stress-related paranoia, well, it's Berserk, so the paranoia is probably justified, but yeah, there's a bit of that in there too. This cold, diagnostic picture of BPD might be scientifically accurate, but to me it has always lacked something. It conveys what you see, but it doesn't convey who the person you're looking at actually is. Even the name of the diagnosis irks me. Borderline personality disorder? To me, it sounds like it's casting blame on the person themselves, on their personality being defective somehow. And that's not really the case. A personality disorder is not something that's wrong with you. It's a reaction to something that was done to you. As I say a lot on this channel, people are stories. And the story of BPD usually begins with tragedy, betrayal, and abuse. Abuse has many forms, and one day I'd like to make a more in-depth video looking at those forms and the different reactions people have to them. For now, just be aware that if you meet someone with BPD, chances are they've been through some shit. But that's not what makes BPD unique. The cruel twist is that whatever shit they went through, they wound up believing that they deserved it. Whatever the shit itself was, it caused you to see yourself as bad, wrong, evil, or damaged in some way. I spent a lot of time struggling to understand self-harming behaviour. It's a common coping strategy of people with BPD, especially in locked units where a lot of other forms of coping are limited. But to me, it makes no sense. Why would you want to experience pain? When someone else tries to hurt you, you avoid it or prevent it, right? So why are you doing it to yourself? Why would you hurt something that you like? Oh. The self-critical part of your mind can be cruel to you, and living with BPD is to struggle against that part of you constantly, to keep it from destroying your sense of self-worth. Sometimes this can be so overwhelming that self-harm almost seems like a rational escape from it. I should clarify that desire to self-harm is not a conscious part of the process. The pain is not the point. The point is to distract yourself from your emotions with the pain. And self-hatred just allows you to go against your instincts to avoid the pain entirely. Realizing the internal struggle makes a lot of the extreme expressions of behavior associated with BPD very understandable. Of course you hurt yourself and push people away, lash out and regret it. You think you deserve it, even though, and I cannot stress this enough, you don't. So what happened to Farnese? What was it about her life that caused her to act the way she does when we first meet her? What was done to her, and why does she think that she deserved it? When discussing abuse, it's tempting to draw up comparisons between people's stories. Fans of Berserk might look at the abuse that Guts experiences and say, well, Farnese grew up rich. Both her parents are still alive, she was given everything she could have ever wanted. What could she possibly be sad about? Here's the thing about suffering. It's relative. Farnese was not a child soldier, she wasn't physically abused by her father or sexually assaulted by anyone, unlike most of the other women in Berserk. What she was neglected. Neglect is a special kind of abuse. Abuse not of targeted, focused, painful memories, but of indifference, a long, slow, drawn-out process of nothing. Just as by action can a person be hurt, so can they by inaction. For those who have never experienced it, let me try and describe it to you. Imagine yourself when you were at school. You achieve something extraordinary. You get perfect marks on your final test, you write a great song, you just make a banging lasagna. You bring it to your parents, your big sister, and your best friend, whoever you most respect in this world, and their response is, and? So what? It would hurt, right? Now imagine that all the time. What would a learning, thinking being do in that situation? Try the opposite. And then you get punished, so clearly that's not the secret to getting what you want either. That despair, that feeling of whatever you do not mattering, is just as much abuse as anything Gambino ever did to Guts. Farnese, as a young girl, did everything that was asked of her, and received nothing for it. For years, that was her norm. As a learning, thinking child, trapped alone, surrounded by servants who had no interest in her, and ignored by the one man whose affection she wanted, her father, Farnese came to the conclusion that nothing she did had any meaning or bearing on the world around her. That is, until one day, a heretic burning occurs just outside her window. Curious, she goes to see what's happening, and an adult man offers her a torch and instructs her to burn the heretic at the stake. She does, and in return for maybe the first time in her life, she receives love, admiration, respect, a smile, and off she goes. Finally, she is seen. She exists. A neglected person, especially a child, will grasp any sort of intimacy, connection, or even shallow attention that they can find. Farnese is no different. A common misinterpretation of Farnese is that she's a pyrophiliac, someone who takes sexual pleasure from the sight of fire and people on fire. That's certainly what Miura seems to be telling you, but that's not exactly what's happening. She's not just sexually attracted to fire, she's a pyro-romantic. That warm feeling in her belly, it wasn't lust, it was love, intimacy. Probably the first time she had felt either of those. Thus, the Pavlovian association is made permanently, seared into her brain like the brand seared into Guts' neck. Pain connected to love. This explains her otherwise disturbing relationship with Serpico. Serpico is a poor boy who was raised by a semi-delusional mother to revere and seek access to nobility, and in seeking a way out of the gutter, he is forced to accept Farnese as his master. Their relationship at first is purely abusive. Serpico is praised by the other servants of the manor purely for being able to withstand the pain of her wild behaviour, and her controlling nature and attitude that she learned from her father. But to Farnese, pain is love. It is affection, the only kind she knows, and keeping him under her strict control is the only way that she's ever learned to keep someone from leaving her, to avoid the fear of Serpico abandoning her. Serpico is a fascinating character by himself and deserves his own video at some point, but his impact on Farnese cannot be ignored. As she says, they both grow up bent, but bent together. When Farnese finds out that her neglectful father is planning to marry her off to whoever is willing to take her, she interprets it correctly as an attempt to abandon her, confirming all the beliefs she's ever had about herself up to that point, that she means nothing. In a moment of pain and vulnerability, she turns to Serpico, the only person in her life that doesn't hate her, and has proved that by remaining at her side. Yes, she has inflicted great pain upon him, but to her, that's why she loves him. She hurt him, and yet he is still here. She feels safe being vulnerable and even romantic towards him, and begs him with her body to deflower her and save her from this feeling of abandonment. Serpico, knowing that he is in fact her half-brother, hesitates, and that momentary hesitation is enough to cause Farnese to go into a crisis. I mentioned splitting earlier, and here it is again. Splitting is an intense emotional swing in a personal relationship between viewing someone as the purest good and the most heinous evil. Just as she burned her pets when they wouldn't behave, so does she burn her feelings for Serpico when he doesn't immediately accept her offer of intimacy. Unwilling to be abandoned though, she sets fire to her father's mansion and dances gleefully among the flames, reminded of the time when she burned people alive and finally got the love and attention her father denied her. An extreme action to combat fear, a fear of abandonment. Aggression is a response to threat, after all. This is an important plot point. Out of her fear of being abandoned, Farnese acts in a way that pushes her father away for good. He abandons her, but this time not to a husband. He sends her away to a convent to learn how to control her actions. He even calls her Devil Child. This begins the next phase of Farnese's life, a phase unfortunately we don't get to see, but it's a phase of control in an institution. Yeah, okay, it's a metaphor for being sectioned. There are ways to recover from BPD. Being locked up in a ward for long periods of time is not one of them. There are studies that show that partial hospitalisation staffed by people who know specialised therapies are pretty effective and they don't cost very much. The standard psychiatric care model, however, is a lot less effective and it takes a lot longer. Institutionalisation is not a way to change someone, only to teach them to control themselves and keep themselves safe. People with personality disorders rarely achieve full recovery inside the hospital system, and the tight constraints of a locked ward becoming a new normal can often make people feel a lot worse. The best you can hope for from a period in hospital is that they learn to control their outward behaviour by controlling the situation around them, learning to numb or avoid the emotions rather than confront them directly. And this is what we see from Farnese. While we see nothing of Farnese inside the convent, what we see is who emerges on the other side, a woman who exists in a comfortable bubble, dictated by religiosity and strict systems of control. She has a set view on how things should be, but an inability to cope with situations that threaten that view or take her by surprise. She is sent out as the commander of the Holy Iron Chain Knights to capture the biggest threat to that religion and her worldview, the prophesied Hawk of Darkness, known only as the Black Swordsman.
Damn. No.
Following the trail of destruction and lost children, see what I did there? She and her order eventually find him, weak from his incredible battle with the Apostle Rosine, and with some help from her loyal subordinates, mostly Serpico and Azan, she manages to achieve her goal. This is the first confrontation Farnese has with Guts, and thus the first challenge to the system of control that she has seen since her convent days. Remember, to Farnese, Guts is the Hawk of Darkness, a prophesized monster set to destroy everything she puts value in, the religion that keeps her emotions in check. The confrontation reveals something interesting. Guts, being more knowledgeable about the world than Farnese, and frankly not giving a fuck at this point, challenges Farnese directly, and with a few words, he manages to trigger Farnese with what she already knows. He, correctly, points out that she is hollow inside, numbed to her own emotions and feelings, hiding behind God, a symbol of her forcing her control over her own desires. In her distress and fear, she lashes out, attempting to torture Guts, losing control of herself in the process. In later scenes, we learn that the association between love and pain still burns deep within her. While she lashes out at Guts, she feels that warmth she felt as a girl, burning heretics and animals alike, her only experience of love. This is a part of BPD that institutions like hospitals, here represented by the Convent, don't like to admit. While forcing someone into a box may control their behaviour, it cannot control what lies beneath the surface forever. When the bubble of security and comfort is broken, the raw emotion will always be there. Sometimes it'll explode outwards with very extreme consequences. This is another interesting moment, not just because of Farnese's outburst, but that Guts doesn't even flinch when she lashes out. To the audience, this is pretty understandable. Guts literally set himself on fire during the fight with Rosine a few chapters ago. Why would a whip even register at this point? Can he feel that? I don't even know. But from Farnese's perspective, she has no idea who Guts is. All she knows is that she lashed out and expressed her emotions openly, and he was still there, looking at her inquisitively. He doesn't regard her any differently or even try to punish her back like her father did. He simply stands there. Gently, she gets closer to him. This moment is easy to miss when it happens because before the art has time to settle in your brain, Azan bursts in to investigate. But don't worry, this will come back later. Later that night, with a little help from the comedic therapist that is Puck, Guts manages to escape and steal into Farnese's tent. What we see there is Farnese engaging in an act that was once called self-flagellation, a religious practice that involved punishing yourself to appease God and absolve you of your sins. Today we call this act self-harm, or deliberate self-injury for the scientifically minded folks. This is a significant moment in revealing what we later know about Farnese, but we'll come back to it in a minute. This is only the start of the most important night of her life.
And I saw a beast rising out of the sea with 10 horns and 7 heads, and a blasphemous name upon its head.
After knocking out both Farnese and an unlucky guard who raised the alarm, Guts takes her hostage and she wakes up half naked, tied up on a horse. Not your average Saturday night, but let's roll with it. The night in question becomes more and more not average as we go on. Farnese is confronted by the ghostly spirits of the dead, gets caught in the middle of a ring of possessed dogs, and lest we forget, the horse incident. Guts tells her that God is giving them a show, and the show that they get is the first crack in Farnese's stifling, controlled little bubble. By the sunrise, Farnese is scared, helpless, and traumatized, but thanks to Guts, alive. And throughout the whole night, for all her learned prayers and systems of control, she couldn't find a single one to keep her safe from this. The only thing that kept her alive was Guts, damaged and panting in the safety of the sunlight. Farnese knows she should hate him and fear him, but instead she finds the sight beautiful. With her comforting bubble cracking, a possessing spirit crawls up to her, taking her face and whispering in her ear what she already knows. She is lying to herself. Her time at the convent, her religion, her position of power and control, none of it fixed anything. Inside, she is still the devil child who burned animals and heretics and her father's home. Her facade will no longer keep her safe, not from this scary new world, and more to the point, won't keep her safe from these terrifying emotions that lurk and boil inside her. The Night of Miracles should really be called the Night of Metaphors. In the period between the sunset and the sunrise, Farnese's personality disorder is demonstrated through Mura making it a metaphor, and as usual making it viscerally extreme. Farnese is shown engaging in self-harm, from which she feels she's being punished but also gets a morbid satisfaction from. In real life, people who engage in self-harm feel something similar. The pain gives them a morbid clarity, the distraction from the emotion, and satisfies their belief that they deserve nothing else. Here we see the possessing spirit as a metaphor for intrusive thoughts. A common symptom of severe BPD is intrusive negative thoughts about yourself. They sometimes feel like voices in your head, but in reality, it's your own voice, your own self-critical mind talking to you. These are the feelings that you push back and repress constantly to prevent you from having a crisis. In the very next scene, a possessed Farnese attempts to sexually goad Guts into satisfying her lust and proving her thoughts correct by literally splitting her in two with his giant sword. This is a metaphor for the rash emotion-driven impulsivity that sometimes comes with BPD. The emotion gets so powerful and intense that they turn to extreme acts in order to quell it. While I'm not saying that all people with BPD want to grind themselves to death on a dragon slayer, the metaphor can also be seen as a suicide attempt, an act of self-harm, self-sabotage, or just impulsive thrill-seeking, all things that people with severe BPD have been known to engage in. Hell, even the rape horse is a metaphor here. After failing to pray to God, Farnese instead tries to control the situation with her authority. She orders the horse to let her mount him. Instead, the exact opposite happens. A demonstration of her control techniques backfiring as he just pulls the reverse card and is like, okay, what the fuck is wrong with me? Did I just seriously defend the rape horse scene from a psychological perspective? What am I doing with myself? Fuck. At any rate, the point is, the Night of Metaphors changes Farnese forever. A crack has emerged in her facade of nobility and religiosity. A crack that will only grow deeper and wider for the rest of the arc, even as she tries harder and harder to pull it back together. As she leaves, she promises that she will kill Guts and seal his lips forever. I don't think she actually expects him to tell anyone about what happened here, but him being alive is proof enough that it did. Farnese will try to repress that night in any way she can, even if it means killing a man who once saved her life. Guts, of course, is oblivious to what this night means for her, but Serpico is not. To get a read on Guts, he tests him before leaving, his eyes belying the fury of a protective sibling, who sees Farnese's loss of control as risky and unsafe. Guts allows him to leave with a gruff remark, but Puck, ever the therapist, just says,
"You know, she seemed kinda sad, that Farnese person. All bound up on all sides."
So here, Mura has fully constructed Farnese at the beginning of her recovery. A young woman full of the desire to be good and make her mark on the world, but crushed and distorted by years of neglect, isolation, and hatred of her own desires and feelings, manifesting into what we would call in the modern day, borderline personality disorder. The Holy See, which is basically just a metaphor for the controlling style of "just stop acting like this" psychiatry, made her believe for the longest time that she could repress the feelings and what she hated about herself and still do good by serving God, or rather, them. But this is falling away now, and it's been proven false by her own personal antichrist in a whirlwind of high emotion and trauma. So what can she do? Her persona and identity are cracking now. But as the story continues, as we will eventually see, no one is ever truly broken. You just need to figure out the right way to build yourself back up again. In part 2, we will cover the complete deconstruction of Farnese as a person and the things we can learn from her struggle to piece herself back together.